I am coming in today to talk to the incredible Clare Reilly, who is the podcaster at Misunderstood or MS Understood, and she's going to be talking about how to advocate for yourself and for others. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I am presenting from today, the Yugambeh people of the Gold Coast in Queensland. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I have to actually say, forgive me, I have had some dental work done today and so my mouth's a bit funny. I'm going to get in Claire do all the talking because I'm not doing a great job of it. Hi Claire, welcome. How are you?
Good, how are you?
I said this is going to be quite funny because I don't know if you saw, I went to the dentist and I did not factor in how much it's going to do my face thing. So anyway, let's focus on you, wonderful woman. Tell me the wonderful existential question of who are you? And I'd love to hear how we met. I know, but tell the others.
It is an existential question, isn't it? Who am I? Well, many things of many titles, as I'm sure most of us are. I suppose in this space, I'm the host of a podcast called MS Understood, where I chat with people from all over the world about multiple sclerosis, who are, people either living with it or family members, carers, or professionals who can support people with MS. I am also the creator of affirmation cards and a life coach for women living with chronic illnesses. I suppose on top of that is I'm a creative, a mum, a wife. I love learning, and yeah, we met at the Incredible Lady Without Limits retreat. Was that nearly 3 weeks ago?
It feels like a lifetime ago, but
But also it feels like it was like yesterday.
Yeah.
So we met at the retreat, and it was an incredible couple of days. Well, like almost 24 hours, I think.
It felt like we were together for so long. It felt like I've known you forever, and that's the beauty of retreats, and that connection that can happen in such a short time, and when you bring the right people together. So it was wonderful that Amy did that for us. But
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so you've mentioned the podcast, and in my head I'm like saying misunderstood, and it's like that reminds me of Kelly Clarkson, that Little Misunderstood in Little Miss Independent, Little Misunderstood. So in my head I'm like, oh, misunderstood, and I totally know what it stands for, MS. We do have some mutual connections. I saw one of them, Kate, pop up on here as well, and the lovely Kelly. So yeah, how did your journey with the podcasting start, and maybe that stems from the MS as well?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with MS in April 2017, so nearly 5 years ago. And my initial response was, cool, I'll be fine. Like, don't worry about it. And then I did what every normal person does and went and ran an off-the-grid outdoor education centre for 2.5 years with my husband and 2-year-old son at the time. It might have been nearly three, and completely ignored my diagnosis, which I don't recommend to anybody. But for me and my mental health, I think it was a really good way of knowing that I can still live my life. My background's in outdoor education. I've always camped and hiked and done that kind of stuff. So this was my dream job. So we went and did that, and then moved home in October 2019. And then that's when I realized that I had MS, and that was like 2.5 years later, which I know sounds crazy, but like where we were working was so exhausting and so tiring, and like just massive for everyone who was working there. So when we got home and my husband's kind of fatigue went away and mine didn't, that's when I had this like, oh shit. I'm like, am I allowed to swear? Am I
aware of swearing? Oh yeah, we're unapologetic here. That's fine.
Great. So yeah, I was like, oh shit, it's not going away. Like that's when I had to deal with it. So yeah, then about 12 months later, I started the podcast. So it was the podcast I wanted when I was first diagnosed. Working at the camp, I wanted to be able to plug my headphones in and like forget about my life, but listen to stories of people who I related to, who were living a life that I could envisage for myself, not the kind of stereotypical story we see, which is a common story also, but not the only one, of people ending up in wheelchairs and that kind of thing. So yeah, so once I kind of got my head in the game and realized that that's, you know, I was dealing with that and it wasn't going to change, that's when I, you know, I took about a year of seeing professionals, seeing therapists all the time. And that's when I really kind of got my head into the space of, cool, I'm ready. And this podcast still doesn't exist, so I'm going to create it. And I didn't have any podcasting experience. I'd done blogging and that kind of stuff for years, but podcasting was new, and editing that audio kind of stuff was all new for me.
A lot of work. But I don't think your reaction is unusual, and in terms of I do know someone else who has MS, and she, well, her thing was actually a little bit different perspective. It was, I am going to go and do all these things because if I'm going to end up in a wheelchair while I guess I have the ability, I'm going to go and do it. But, you know, she's still kind of, I guess, waiting for that. And so, maybe it's not going to be like that for me. And that's the challenging thing with MS. It looks so different to so many people. Yeah. And so, you know, you sharing your story is one thing, but having those other people come on and share their perspectives, because it just looks so different.
But I think also part of it is, like, I have interviewed multiple people who are full-time in wheelchairs now, but they're doing kind of outrageous things. One's
yeah, we froze. Yeah, it's okay. You're back.
Oh no, I just got a reminder to get off Instagram. You know, that like thing.
Yes.
So
yes.
I should have turned that off. It'll probably happen again. So I'm sorry about that. And
mine does that too, saying, you know, we're trying to like monitor your time, right? And not be on the internet all the time.
Yeah.
When I'm doing a live.
I know. Is my camera working for you?
All good. Yeah. We'll
okay,
see.
Great. So yeah, and I've also spoken with a full-time wheelchair user who's the Britain's strongest disabled man. So he's in strongman competitions and you know, is like living a super active life in that way. So I think it's those stories as well of people living in wheelchairs, living incredible lives that we don't always get to hear.
Yes, and that you can do things. It's just that adapting, isn't it? And that learning to do things in a different way, which is I really liked. I did some volunteering with Disabled Winter Sport Australia, and I think we're changing it to, you know, like talking about ability, and it's like, you know, different ability. And it was really nice to see there that we were all on the snow. We were all enjoying the snow. We were just in different modes of transport, which we are in any case. My husband's a skier, I'm a snowboarder. We're different, you know, so it's just like, are you in a sit ski, or are you in a, are you on the skis, or are you on the snowboard, or are you, you know, playing in the snow and being in a different environment? It was really eye-opening to me, because I hadn't been around many people with disabilities at the time, and that in itself looks different. And I don't know if people necessarily always class chronic illness as disability either. So that's something that's really not understood.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, there's a huge range, obviously, of disability and chronic illness. And I think there is a line where they kind of blur, and not everyone considers their MS to be a disability. But for me, I use a walking stick. I have a disability parking pass. I will often use a walking frame. Today I tried my first wheelchair, so that, you know, I use a range of aids, and I do consider myself to be disabled, but I know not everyone living with MS does. So I think that is something
or wants to be classified as that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's the level of how it affects you, because like you've said, is it just ranges so much between person to person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess one of the first times that I was really, I really learned about MS was when I got to trek the Great Wall of China for MS. I was the tour leader, but you know, the group had raised money for MS, for people living with MS, but we actually had 4 women on the trek who had it. And so, and just the diversity within those women of their symptoms and how they're living with it was so different. Yeah. And one of the big learnings, which I shared with you as well, was that it was, you know, some of the symptoms that came out, you know, in one way, in one of the women on one of the days, people were saying, oh, you need to eat, or you need to do this, or you need to do that, or whatever. And it's like, no, this is just MS. Like, you need to, and we need to listen to her and support her, but also not make a bit, you know, fuss and fan around. And it was sort of, it was very interesting to experience and see when you're close to someone, to see other people, how they react.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like we've said, it's so different for everyone. And people want it to be treated so differently. I think just like humans, everyone's individual. So, you know, a conversation never goes astray.
And so you've really become an advocate. And I guess how does that present in your life, being an advocate? I mean, obviously you're advocating on behalf of other people with MS and spreading this message that you wish, or giving this platform, I guess, that you wish you had when you found out. But how do you have to also advocate for yourself?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly tricky. It's a really fine line, I suppose, between advocating for myself and advocating for others. And it's kind of something that I didn't fall into. I just kind of slowly got there. It just kind of gradually became the position that I'm in. You know, sharing so many stories and hearing so many stories, and then having the awareness of so many stories gives me, I suppose, a level of understanding. For me at the moment, the thing that I'm really passionate about is accessibility. I think it's something that even as an able-bodied person, up until realistically 2 years ago, even through my diagnosis, I still don't think of if there's going to be steps into somewhere, or if there's going to be, it's honestly, it's my internal ableism that has taken me so long to have to cross a barrier to purchase a wheelchair to make my life easier. So that, to me, at the moment, is what I'm really passionate about. And also, I think, like I said before, it's about having conversations, because everyone is so different. Not just people with MS, everyone is so different. So we should be able to have conversations around that. I mean, particularly, obviously, around MS is the awareness that I'm trying to raise through the podcast of just how incredibly vast the symptoms are of people living with MS, and they vary so much. You know, you can be looking at someone down the street who has MS and you would never pick it, but they could be dealing with fatigue or brain fog or numbness and tingling, and you can't see it. I think in some ways I got off easier because people can see it, so they make accommodations for that. So I suppose that's the awareness, is just the huge array of what people are going through. Yeah.
And as I said, it's that invisibility of it, but also understanding that some people, you know, we've sort of touched on as well, some people do want to talk about it, they do want to be recognized with it, and then sometimes I guess there's that point of you don't want it to take over your life.
Yeah.
And even as you introduced yourself, we're not just like, oh, this is Claire with MS, like you know, like you and I, we connected on other stuff, and I saw you with a walking stick, but it wasn't until a little while later that we discussed the fact why you have the walking stick, and it doesn't really matter. It does matter. Sorry, it does matter because it's a part of your life. But I mean, it wasn't like that. Didn't have to be the start of our conversation.
Well, yeah, and I think it's so different is obviously a lot of everything that I share online now has to do with disability or MS. Um, and that's what I choose to share publicly. There is obviously so much more to my life and so many other passions that I just don't need the world to know about. Because I think using this platform for good and trying to use it for people to have awareness and just to really raise that awareness of disability and MS particularly, given that it's not something that I had ever known about before being diagnosed. And so, yeah, I think, we all have elements of ourselves that we're comfortable sharing with everyone, but also I'd rather not talk about, given that most of my day, I either interview people about MS or I write about MS or I am interviewed about MS, is when I turn off the work clock at the end of the day, I'd rather talk about Indigenous studies of Australia or what book you've been reading or if you've been creating something or, like there's so many other things that I would rather talk about than, outside of work time that other than MS.
Yeah. We do have someone here saying rock smuggler saying thank you for, so glad that they found you, so which is wonderful, and you would be helping so many people to have that space. And I totally understand that you found this place where you want to talk about it, but understanding that there's many sides to you, many facets to you. And one of the things that we were on the retreat for was like to work on our businesses, and you are building that side of the business. So do you want to tell me a bit more about that, I guess, the life coaching side and the possible retreats that might happen in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super passionate, and definitely one of my passions is obviously working with women who are newly diagnosed or like me have kind of got to that point of accepting slowly or realizing that diagnosis is not going anywhere. So it could be a new diagnosis or a long diagnosis where things have I frozen again?
No, you're good. You're back.
It could be a long diagnosis where things have changed, or you just need a little bit more support from someone who's been through and is going through something that you're experiencing. Someone, my husband's amazing, he's super supportive, but he doesn't live with MS, and so those kind of things, like, he can just never really understand that experience of what I'm going through. So in terms of, I suppose, coaching and life coaching, that's what I'm wanting, or that's what I share with clients, is just that level of understanding and, some support of how to kind of get through that barrier of grief and denial. And we don't ever have to.
We've just had a pause.
Oh, no.
Yeah, got you. You had grief and denial.
So grief and denial. And I think that, it's about not having to completely ignore them or ever move completely through them, but being able to kind of work with those emotions because they're natural and real, and we shouldn't be denying ourselves those feelings. So yeah, in terms of life coaching, that's what I support women with. And I would love so much in the future, it will be coming, a retreat for women living with chronic illnesses, just to have some time with other people who understand what you're going through, some time to really rest and recharge. Something that I think often as mothers, as people in now society of trying to always be busy and always be on, just to give ourselves a really good chance to rest and connect with other people going through the same thing. So yeah, one day there will be a retreat on the cards.
I love it. And that was something, that's something that I found from retreats. And it's obviously, I've launched the Rest and Receive retreat because that's the thing. I think it's the rest that is, and the space being away from your day to day, being this other space and being connected to other people. And by the nature of retreats, they attract those people who are willing to, I guess, do the work or go through a change or, invest in themselves and, then it's that time together. And obviously we got a little bit of time together, which was so nice to connect as women and talk about our businesses, talk about our challenges, talk about our lives, have that little bit of, switch off from the day. And as you say, I think, people with chronic illnesses and disabilities, whether it be due to finances or due to just the nature of everything in life, is a little bit more challenging, don't get that break, don't get that time. So that will be such a gift for them to have.
I think part of it too is in my day-to-day life is I don't really know anyone else with MS or living with a disability or a chronic illness, So I think part of that is part of the idea of the retreat is meeting people who, almost in a way of similar to the business retreat, is we all came together, and the thing we had in common was building our businesses. And because of that, we had, things in common and so much alike. And the idea of the retreat, of having people with chronic illnesses or MS being able to, is really connecting with other people who understand what you're going through.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, it's that being heard and being acknowledged. And I had a podcast interview with one of my former clients yesterday, and she was talking about she sort of, I guess, has an acquired wouldn't even be a disability condition, I guess. And it was that coming to terms with the experience of it herself, but then her people were trying to be supportive, and they were saying, oh, like I said before, which is why I caught myself, it's like, oh, it doesn't matter, or I don't notice it, or it's not a bother to me. And it's like, but it's a bother to her, and it doesn't make her feel good. And so, acknowledging that someone, it's like, let's not, there's no elephant in the room, like you have MS, but it's like, we don't need to talk about it all the time. But if you want to talk about it, or if there's a reality of like, there is a time where you need more assistance, can't go, oh no, it's fine. Like, it's like, no, you have to address that. It's the reality. And so for you, like, I guess, was there a time, I know that you said you sort of ignored it, but then was there a time where there was a real challenge to your identity in terms of understanding that this was something that's now part of you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's been multiple, to be honest, even in the last, so I suppose really there was the 2.5 years initially where I ignored it, and the 2.5 years kind of since then, since I moved home, and then about 1.5 years since the podcast started. And I think that initial grief of the realization of my body's never going to be what it once was. I'm never going to be able to hike 20 kilometers in a day, which I used to do. And I'm never going to be able to do some of those things. So that was massive, that first realization when we moved home. And even, last week when I decided that a wheelchair would be a beneficial thing to add to my life, the time before that, probably, I don't know, maybe the 6 months before that of really battling and fighting against that was a kind of a shadowy time of my life, I would suppose. And then making the decision and that switch in my life, in my brain of, it doesn't mean what I think it means to get a wheelchair. And that was a big turning point as well. So I think there's going to continue to be, as my ability and mobility changes, and as I come to terms with things or don't come to terms with things, there's going to be those real life-changing moments, just again and again and again.
And, we won't all experience them in quite as a drastic a way. I mean, probably when becoming a mother, you would have as well. It's the biggest one you can go through, and you can go through as a person. But we all have these things that, we acquire these experiences, and we acquire these things that happen in our lives that we need to then incorporate into who we are today. And there's this little affirmation card that I have, because I love them too. And it's something like, you never promise to be the same person tomorrow as you are today. And sometimes that one challenges me, because I'm like, I fundamentally believe you are who you are. What you are, there's a part of you that's always you. But we do get these new experiences, lived experiences. We do have these new things, people that come into our world, and things that happen in our world that we have to incorporate and adjust while still making sure that the who we are is there. And yeah, it's sort of a good reminder for everyone, but probably maybe not quite as dramatic or
no, I think, like you've said, is everything we do, and it's something that, you know, we talk about a lot. I think I talk about a lot, is that you know, live like you could get hit by a bus tomorrow, as morbid as that is. And but I do really think that, like you've said, is every choice that we make, and obviously not having a disability isn't a choice that I've made, but everything that impacts our life is shaping us a little bit. You know, it's adding a little bit, or taking away a little bit, or it's really molding us into the person that we're going to continue to grow into, as well as, you know, like you've said, that core, we're still there, but there's always going to be the malleable kind of outside shell that can move and grow as we introduce anything. And that can be, like you've said, not just a disability, but a new friend, or a loss of a friendship, or a child, or moving house, or like everything is going to impact our lives.
I think, you know, the journey you're on has, you know, your storytelling, your sharing, your providing space for other people, like it is such a gift to so many. And the fact that you've chosen to share that and to be open and vulnerable, it's such a blessing and a gift. So and for you to have that, I guess, strength as well to do that, because it, you know, it takes a lot to be like talking about that thing that's, you know, challenging all the time. But what a wonderful way to turn, you know, to use your story and to use your voice to advocate for others.
Well, thank you. I suppose it came quite naturally in a weird way. It's what, like I said, it's what I wanted, and now I love talking to people. So, you know, I suppose I'm in the right position.
I love it. So tell me, how can people find you? How can they connect with you to learn more?
Well, Instagram is the best place. I love Instagram. So you can find me at clare.reilly. My website is in the midst of getting updated, but it's nearly done, and that's clarereilly.com. I suppose they're the best places to find me, and I'd love to connect.
And the podcast is MS Understood. In your head, it's easier misunderstood, but it's MS Understood.
And it's on all podcasting platforms, so you can just search MS Understood.
Thank you for taking the time to speak with me today, and I loved the connection that we had, and I'm so excited to see what comes next and to see you again.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. I am honoured to have been able to share my story.
Thank you. Take care, Claire.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining.